All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been creating a series of video presentations that are based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. We're in Tools and Testing, talking cross-browser testing, and here we're going to be talking about implementing feature detection. As mentioned here, this involves working out whether a browser supports a certain block of code. And if it does, running some code, and if it doesn't, running other code. As mentioned there, you want to make sure the browser can always provide a working experience rather than crashing or giving some kind of an error message or just basically doing something you wouldn't want to have done. This article details how to write your own simple feature detection, how to use libraries to speed up implementation and native features for feature detection, such as @supports. All right. So, as mentioned right here, the idea behind feature detection is that you can run a test to determine whether a feature is supported in the current browser, then conditionally run code based on whether or not it is. All right. So it says, let's recap and look at the example we touched on in handling common JavaScript problems. This was a geolocation example. All right, and notice what they've got here. If geolocation in Navigator. So this is going to detect whether or not the browser supports geolocation. Now, in the else, it says give the user a choice of static maps. All right, well, in this case, you're going to be working with their current position. This could involve a lot of code. You might have to ask where they are. You might be able to bring up something that, even though it's not geolocation, would be able to ask just literally where they are and maybe figure out their latitude and longitude, etc. All right. It is probably better to use an established feature detection library rather than writing your own. Well, that makes sense, because why, if somebody has already gone to the trouble of writing the code for you, why not use it? All right, it says before we move on, we'd like to say one thing up front. Don't confuse feature detection with browser sniffing. All right, browser sniffing literally basically is the ability to go in and tell what operating system and or browser and or browser version you're using. It says this is a terrible practice that should be discouraged at all costs. All right. So in this section, we'll look at implementing your own feature detection tests, both in CSS and JavaScript. You can write tests for CSS features by testing for the existence of an element style.style.property. Here's an example. As it says there, a classic example might be to test for Flexbox support in a browser. Although, as you notice, if I go into Can I Use, and I come in here and I put in Flexbox, you're going to notice that it's very few. I mean, IE6 to 9, Opera, some of the Opera Mobile, and then limited support on some of the other ones. All right. For browsers that don't support it, we could use a floated layout that works okay, although as it says, it's more brittle and hacky and it won't look as nice. All right. So they've got an example in here, and again, if you look in here, this is where I am right now. I'm down to here. My plan is this morning is to finish these two and get into the server side stuff. I want to get done with this because what I want to do is I want to build a site from the ground up. This site that we've been looking at, this no, not a GitHub example, but the thing that we were working on with the you can call me Mo, I love Missouri type of thing, and I'm going to be working on that hopefully already starting next week. So it says we've got an HTML file, a flex layout CSS, a float layout CSS, and a basic styling. All right, so it says save them to a new directory, and we'll add an HTML5 shiv too, so that HTML5 semantic elements will style properly in older versions of IE. Download the latest version, unzip the zip copy, etc. And then you're going to come in here and you're going to do this. So if it's not equal to undefined, and if this is not equal to undefined, you know that you're able to use flex. Otherwise, you'll have to use float. So conditionally, you're saying, hey, check with my browser, for lack of better words, and not even my browser, but am I supporting, I guess it would be the browser, am I supporting Flexbox? If I am, give me the Flex layout, and I'm going to use the Flex layout CSS. And if I don't, I'm going to use the float layout CSS. All right. So it says if you have a hard time, here's the finished version, it looks like. And let's just take a look. We'll throw this up on the desktop and we'll call this flex or not.html. All right. Doesn't look like it's got too much in it, to be honest with you. All right. But the idea, again, is that you can detect whether or not somebody has a working version of something you're looking for. And if they don't, all right, you can provide some kind of fallback behavior. I guess this was the live version. Oh, there you go. All right, I didn't have the CSS loaded as well, so that's why mine looked a little junkier. Often such approach is overkill for a minor feature detection problem. You can often get away with using multiple vendor prefixes and fallback properties, and we've talked about that earlier. All right, and again, the idea is hopefully over time, these vendor prefixes will go away and that everything will be supported by virtually all browsers. All right, in recent times, CSS had its own native feature detection mechanism introduced, the @supports rule. This works similarly to media queries, except that instead of selectively applying CSS depending on a media feature, it selectively applies CSS depending on whether or not the feature is supported. All right, it says with the previous example could have been rewritten like this. So again, in the past, we've used a media rule, something like that there, but that's been for the type of browser, I should say typically the size of the browser, or even the size of the device that you're using. This is based on whether or not a feature is supported. So as it says, it applies the CSS rule only when the current browser supports both FlexFlow row and Flex1 declaration. It also has an or not. All right. It says this may look a little more convenient than the previous example. We already saw an example of JavaScript feature detection earlier on. Generally, such tests are done via one of the common patterns. You already saw this one with the if geolocation in Navigator earlier. All right, we talked about whether an element has a certain property or not. The double not in the example that's above here, right there, is a way to force a return value to become a proper Boolean value rather than a truthy falsy value that may skew results. So to become a proper Boolean means that should also always rather return true or false. We also wanted to mention the window.matchMedia JavaScript feature at this point. This is a property that allows you to run media tests inside JavaScript, media query tests. All right, it says as an example there, the snapshot demo makes use of it to selectively apply the brick JavaScript library to handle the UI layout, but only on a small screen layout. Don't want to run through all that right now. I thought maybe they'd have a working version. All right, we've talked a little bit about Modernizr. And as it says, it is possible to implement your own feature detection system using techniques like the ones above. But if something already exists to make your life easier, why not use it? The mother of all feature detection libraries they mentioned there is Modernizr, which can detect just about everything you'll ever need. When you're experimenting with Modernizr, you might as well use the development build, which includes, the latest and greatest. So they go and they say here, let's have a look at how Modernizr works in terms of selectively applying CSS. If you look at the DOM inspector, it says you'll see that Modernizr has updated your class like so. All right. It now contains a large number of classes that indicate the support status of different technology features. You can also find a list of what the class name means in there. Moving on, it says, this is a pretty extensive example, okay? And I'm not trying to take anything away from this. So far, we're up to somewhere in the area of 230 to 235 videos in this series. I didn't know it was going to become the monster, so to speak, it's become. And once I finish this section and I go into the server side, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time, especially on the Node and Express sections. So we should be up around 300 lectures by the time this gets done. So Modernizr is also equally well prepared for implementing JavaScript feature detects too. It does this by making the global Modernizr object available to the page it's applied to. And again, they have another example of that. So I didn't nearly do this the justice it needed, but the point is, feature detection is the idea of before you try to do something, you want to make sure that the browser that you're using will support the feature that you want to implement. And if it doesn't, rather than having the program blow up or error out, you provide the user with some kind of an alternative. All right. So what's left is automated testing and setting up your own automated environment. And again, I'm not going to lie to you. These are going to go very quickly, all right, because I want to finish these last couple up.